Are Let's Play videos illegal? Let's take a look. So if you're on YouTube, it's probably no surprise to you that Let's Play videos are kind of a big deal. PewDiePie is the most subscribed to person on YouTube. There's Sky Does Minecraft, who comes in at number 15, and not to mention tons of other amazing creators. In fact, we even did our second episode ever on why Let's Play is so huge. But it's not just YouTube. Twitch turned Let's Plays into a live event. South Park just did an episode on it, and it's probably weeks away from getting a treatment on 60 Minutes, so your grandparents can ask you about it.
Hey, I'm 60, and I'm still better than you at this game.
Playing video games in front of others and in turn watching those hours while away is clearly an emergent phenomenon. But for all its major success, there's an incredibly important question that no one's really asked yet. Are Let's Play videos legal? I'm being totally serious here. Clearly no one's contended their legality yet, but one copyright lawyer told me that Let's Play videos have completely flown under the radar. There's simply no case law to point to for a precedent, and that could become a very serious problem. So let's find out if Let's Play has something to worry about. So if this were to happen, it would likely be because Let's Play videos would run afoul of, drumroll please, copyright. You probably vaguely know what this means, but let's get specific. Copyright is a legal right that grants the creator of an original work exclusive rights to its use and distribution so that said creator can make money. I'm not a lawyer, but that's basically the gist of it. And of course, the video games that Let's Players love, they're owned by someone else. Copyright is one of the forms of what's known as intellectual property, and that means if a copyright holder, Nintendo, EA Sports, Activision, whoever, feels like someone's infringing on their legal rights, they can take action. So far, this hasn't really been a problem for a very simple reason. Game publishers and creators typically don't view Let's Play videos as competitors. Because unlike posting a piece of music on a message board or shaky pirated theater footage of the next Fast and the Furious movie, which I can't wait for, a recording of someone else playing a video game isn't really a substitute for the game itself. And in the case of Five Nights at Freddy's and Flappy Bird, Let's Players ostensibly helped lift those games out of obscurity. There's no way that game publishers would want to file suit, right? But that could change very easily. Xbox One, for example, has its own recording functionality that allows people to upload gameplay footage. It's not as big as YouTube, obviously, but let's say Microsoft wanted to keep recorded footage of their games like Titanfall as exclusive to the Xbox One. It would be pretty easy for their gang of lawyers to yell copyright, issue a billion takedown notices, and remove Let's Play videos until the case was settled. Esport makers live stream via their own platform, but let's say one of them wants to try to control Let's Plays or shoutcasts of the games as well. It's like the NFL. It's their game, their call. And before you start saying, Let's Play is really good for business, that's what Jamin just said, any company would be really dumb to try this. First of all, dumber things have happened. Remember, AMC tried to take down fake Mad Men Twitter accounts, and second of all, not all Let's Plays can be good for business. Just look at Activision, who recently sent copyright takedown notices to Let's Players who showed Call of Duty glitches.
I don't even know how to explain what happened to me. This game is broken.
Given that buggy launches have plagued companies like Ubisoft and EA and affected their public share price, there's a financial incentive to this type of aggressive copyright policing. Fortunately, there's a very interesting case to be made for the legality of Let's Play videos. PewDiePie, if you're watching, I'm about to save you a lot of money on legal fees. I'll invoice you later. So let's say I'm Joe or Joanna Let's Player and I receive some scary copyright takedown from a huge international games conglomerate. I decide I want to lawyer up and fight them. What might I argue in court?
Round one, fight!
Well, the thrust of my argument would be that Let's Play qualifies for what's called fair use in the United States. Fair use means that you can use copyrighted material without acquiring permission from the rights holders first. It's what allows a show like The Soup, one of my personal favorites, to use clips from other reality TV shows, or for us here at Game Show not to have to write a letter every time we want to use a clip like this. Or like this. There are limits to fair use, of course, but the exact definition of fair use is also really complicated and wide-ranging. That's intentional though. It's a lot like free speech in that it allows us to argue about its meaning. The big thing to understand is that fair use privileges transformative versions of an original work, and this is where Let's Play has a very strong case. For an example of transformative work, we can turn to the words of Judge Louis L. Stanton of the U.S. District Court in his defense of the artist Jeff Koons, who was using another artist's work. Stanton argued that a work's use of another copyrighted work does not supersede the objective of the original, but uses it as raw material in a novel way to create new information, new aesthetics, and new insights. His words. That seems like a pretty high bar. So how would Let's Play do that? Here's the two big things you'd argue. And again, just to be clear, I am not a lawyer, so take this all with a grain of salt. Okay, first you might argue that the purpose and character of Let's Plays could count as commentary. As it turns out, all those hoots, hollers, and screams might actually be a legal safeguard. They could be seen as commentary, believe it or not.
It really feels like I'm looking down a hole all the way. I'm not scared. Ah!
That's why taking down those Call of Duty glitch videos is so problematic. I think identifying mistakes could be seen as a form of critique and therefore covered by fair use. Second, and here's where things get really interesting for video games as a medium, you can argue that each individual playthrough is completely unique, a completely unique occurrence, and thus constitutes what is called a public performance. But it's not all gravy and good times for every single Let's Play. When I spoke to Andy Sellers at Harvard's Berkman Center for Internet and Society, he said that the uniqueness of the performance was actually tied to the type of game you played. Games that are, say, procedurally generated, like Diablo or Spelunky, where new levels are dictated anew and randomly by the game's code, those are more open to new performances because every game is different and therefore it's more transformative. But games that have copious amounts of cutscenes like Metal Gear Solid are actually more problematic for Let's Players because at times they feel like you're watching a movie. In that case, a Let's Play video is not different than playing the game yourself. You see the same plot points, the same spoilers, etc. In the eyes of copyright, it would be a substitute, and that's a problem. That's one of the big reasons that Let's Play videos took off with the introduction of Minecraft. The game's randomness allowed for wholly original playthroughs every single time. Ultimately, until this flares up in court, we'll never really know, but here's what's really exciting. In 2007, Columbia law professor Tim Wu laid out a case for what he called tolerated use. Here's what he argues. In the last decade, millions of us have wandered into a legal gray area by posting photos to Facebook that have trademark images in them, or publishing fan fiction, or recording a live concert on our iPhones and then sharing it with friends. Because the internet allowed a democratization of expression, you're seeing a developing world of people, that is, lawyers, tolerating third-party content even if the law would let them stop it. That's tolerated use. It's kind of like jaywalking. Yes, it's illegal, but everyone does it, and no, the world doesn't descend into Mad Max-style lawlessness. Except in Germany, do not jaywalk in Germany, they do not like it. The meteoric rise of Let's Play videos without legal impediment thus far shows that we're becoming more accepting about what we think copyright can and should do. That's really exciting for a young medium like video games that's still figuring out its way. So what do you think? As Let's Play videos continue to become bigger and more profitable, will they fall on the wrong side of the law, or will our expanding definition of copyright give them a free pass? Hash it out in the comments, and if you like what you saw, please subscribe. Many thanks to James Grimmelman of the University of Maryland and Harvard's Andy Sellers for their advice on this episode, and I will see you all next week. Over the last couple weeks, we covered the game design of Tinder, that dating app, as well as the games that I'm looking forward to in 2015. Let's see what you had to say. First up, Tinder. The film director one and a couple others of you said that Tinder was a failure because you or other people that you knew failed to get matches. Now look, there's a lot of reasons why that might be the case, but one could be your location. There's something called the network effect, which is basically the idea that a fax machine, for example, is only useful if there are other fax machines to connect to it. And Tinder kind of works the same way. So if you live in a place, so very far from other people or not in a major city, which Tinder obviously has a bias towards, then it might be harder to find people who match your exact criteria or are going to be available in your dating pool. So yeah, there are a lot of reasons for why that might be. I hope that that works itself out in time. Michael Constantine and a couple others of you took issue with what I was saying about arranged marriages. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that arranged marriages are institutionally a bad thing for everyone. I wasn't trying to make a dig at them. I was only trying to contrast the promise of arranged marriages with the promise of contemporary dating technology. In the latter case, the idea is that all of a sudden you'll have this whole new world of people that you'll be matched up with. But if dating tech becomes so advanced that it's just telling you who's the person that you should be with X%, 90% accuracy, then we're really back in the same spot. In one case, it was your parents that picked who you're gonna marry, and in the latter case, it was Tinder or OkCupid or whoever. Ivory Oasis is saddened by the use of design towards exploitative and shallow human pursuits, which I think kind of throws people who use dating apps under the bus. Yes, there are absolutely people who use apps like Tinder just for that, sort of like last minute, late night hookup sort of thing. thing, but there are also people who, you know, find relationships, or this is a way for them to spend their 20s or wherever that might be. So I don't think it's quite fair to say that it's shallow because it's quick or because it gives you something immediately. Games do this all the time. Even games that have like really meaningful experiences often have elements of them that give you instant gratification, instant feedback. Because if it didn't, I mean, I don't know, even with great games, people might get bored and stop playing. Reload999 has two specific things that they take issue with. The first is this idea that that what I'm actually talking about in this Tinder episode is interaction design, not game design. You could call it interaction design, you could call it systems design, you could call it game design. A lot of these different design practices share a lot of different traits. So, you know, building board games has a lot of similarities to graphic design and user interface design. So you're seeing a lot of these different fields kind of converging on this sort of this common skill set. So no, that wouldn't be surprising at all that there are elements of interaction design in obviously in the game design of Tinder. The second is this idea that good game can't be solved, and Relo argues that this is a contradiction to other things I've said in previous videos. What I mean by solved is that there isn't necessarily a single optimal strategy for playing, even for really narrative-based games. So if you look at a game like Gone Home or Kentucky Route Zero, even though the options there for choice might be more limited than, I don't know, a game like chess or a big open world game like Grand Theft Auto, that doesn't mean that those games are quote-unquote solvable, because the narrative experience, those interactions are going to be unique from person to person. So that's what I meant by that. Okay, on to my favorite games of 2015 and what you all had to say. First of all, a bunch of you said that I missed Persona and also The Witcher seem to be two really common requests. Oh, and the new Zelda game as well. And I'm sorry that we used a Zelda sound and then didn't actually mention Zelda in the episode. Sorry about that. Meepone12 and a lot of you took issue with me using the term cinematic to describe the Order 1886, specifically because it's been, I guess, reported elsewhere that part of the reason for the letterbox anamorphic approach is that it helps the game render at a better frame rate on the technology that people are running at home on their PlayStations, etc., etc. I don't want to get too bogged down on the technical side. Regardless, me describing something as cinematic, regardless of what the technical reasons for why that might be, doesn't mean that I can't use that term, because I think that cinematic goes far beyond just technology. It's a sensibility, it's how you put things together, it's a certain look and feel. Obviously lighting is a big piece of it. So that's how I was like using that term. I don't use it lightly, and I think that the order still totally fits. Kharmapolizei, that's a really good handle. Anyway, Karma points out that I really like games with color, which I think is, yeah, I guess that's pretty true if you look at the selections. I like things with like bright features. You'll see that in my home, obviously with our set as well. But I also like that that color allows different forms of expression, allows different types of stories to be told. We see a lot of grays and blacks in games, and it's nice to see blues and reds and these other like really strong colors that you don't see so much in games. So yeah. Guilty as charged. And finally, a big thank you to everyone in Louisville, Kentucky who came to meet me at Quill's Coffee for a cup of coffee. It's always really fun to, you know, meet people who watch the show. I do this in New York and I do it in a studio with just Morgan, and so it's really nice to get a sense of like who's on the other end. Who are the people leaving notes in the comments? Who are the people who are watching the show, active subscribers, etc. I'm gonna do more of these meetups in the future, so please keep an eye out for it. But again, thank you, Louisville, Kentucky. I will see you soon.